ike mai luna mai e. O nā mea huna no e au, o nā mele.
We did, as part of the opening protocol, 2 oli and 1 pule. These are forms of communication. In the Hawaiian style, we use oli as the communication format structure. In all that our kupuna did, they could do the oli. So we did an oli that recognizes this place, this hale. It recognizes the kuahu out here. So, in protocol, when you approach some place that's new for you, be prepared to acknowledge the spiritual entities that abide in that location. On a recent trip to Tahiti this past summer, a group of us with the Lonopuha group went to Raiatea in the Society Islands, but we got to travel between Raiatea and Taha'a. We did protocols on Raiatea, but when we went to this other island, it was a new aina, a new place. So, although they only to us, heli mai, mai va mai, 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 we have a responsibility as part of protocol to recognize the spiritual entities that abound in that place in Taha'a. We do not assume that everybody believes in the same spiritual entities. So we did that protocol. We recognize the spiritual entities on that island. We introduced ourselves through chants. We talked about our purpose for coming to the island. We asked permission, not just of the people, but of the spiritual entities to allow us to be there. And then we waited. Even though they said, "Mai, come in, come in," we waited until we felt we had a sign that indicated the acceptance of our request. Once the lead person and I looked at each other because we recognized the cue, then we move forward. Yeah. So, oli and pule are forms of communication with the powers that be. In the Hawaiian worldview, on the broad global spectrum, we look at the macro level of an equilinear triangle that represents balance and lokahi. Man with the environment, the aina, the heavens, the ocean. With spirituality, that would be the God of the institution you believe in, or your traditional beliefs in a higher power. It also is about recognizing your personal spirituality from outside of you to inside of you. Yeah. in our class here, Nohona Hawaii incorporates the macro way of looking at the Hawaiian way of living. But we also recognize there's a smaller triangle which represents each one of us. Yeah. You bring with you that spiritual entity that you believe in. How many of us recognize that when we're upset, we need guidance? That we think of somebody that we have turned to who was alive. Yeah. And we carry that person with us, no matter where we go, because we always are prone to encountering stress and crisis. So, this is the triangle of Pono that represents the person. This one is man with the world environment. So it's macro. This one is micro. Yeah? Micro is the spirit. It is the mind. It is the body. It is the balance of mind, spirit, and uhani, and the body. Yeah. Okay. So, when we talk about spirituality in this case, we are really focusing on the individual, talk about Pono. But we have Pono with the environment. If man breaks that ecosystem of cycle of all things that live, you create an imbalance. Let me give an example because this is environmental. Oh, over 20 years ago, the governor and the legislature had views of having this area, which was agriculture with a lot of sugarcane. There was already plans to purchase land here for a second city. And what that means is the property owners, Campbell Estate, sold to the state and got investors interested in coming up with this vision of a second city. Man's vision was to look at how best to use the land for man. It was secondary for them to think about, what about those other entities that lived in this area? There was some thought about the pueo, who was very abundant in this area. Old-time homesteaders from Nanakuli, when they went from home to Honolulu, on the way in, they see 8 to 10 pueo flying, coming home at dusk. The pueo flying in the air too. Now you ask them, how many do you see? Infrequently, 1 or 2. Yeah. That is just an example. So, when man comes in and they redo the aina, they're interfering with the natural ecosystem of that land. They bulldoze, they build houses, they cross over ancient pathways that for Hawaiians we know. The uhani, the spiritual marchers, once a month travel Makai Mauka. they build homesteads there that block the pathway. And what happens? The residents in those houses are confronted with noises like the house is going to be entered into by violent people. But it only happens once in a while, according to the moon. So they left to wonder, what the heck is going on? Man, from the Western lens, conquers nature, does not go with the flow of nature. The Hawaiian would know by their kuhuna, oh, this is an ancient trail. No, build your house over here. Build on the side. Yeah. So, spirituality is connected with place. So man, by causing a disturbance in that balance with the traditions of indigenous people, create imbalance for families in the community and the community themselves. Yeah. So let's focus on spirituality. I talked about spirituality as related to your religion, your belief in that supreme being. But there's also other entities that you believe in, like deceased kupuna or deceased makua. Yeah. So for the Hawaiian, we have the entities that are outside of us. But our kupuna and our makua are part of our mo'oku'auhau, our genealogy. We have their DNA inside of us. So that's the internal part that we can turn to. On the external part, traditionally, our gods, Kane, Ku, Lono, Kanaloa, even Hina and Pele, they're outside, they're manifest in plant form, in mineral form, in ocean form, in bird form, in natural elements like the wind, the rain, the clouds, the sun. They're all around us. Yeah. And they exist in Kinolau. Our gods replicated their mana in plant life. The tea leaf right outside of these stone walls of the hale, yeah, is the body form of one of the major gods. The ulu plant over there is the body form of a major god. These dried hangings, uhaloa, is the body form of another major god. And they're all growing around here. So when I look outside of me, I see all the energy of the mana in the plants. Yeah. And that is the essence for la'au lapa'au, healing with herbal medicine. Because those practitioners believe all of these plants have blood. They are alive, they have mana. And I look at them, I feel protected. I feel welcome. Yeah. I'm in my element, in balance with my environment. spirituality has a channel of communication with every single one of us. A lot has to do with your willingness to give recognition to it and to allow yourself to experience and to be open to it. Recently, in Pohakuloa on the Big Island, from Mauna Kea, it was so confirming to me that the elements of the akua, kane, ku, lono, kanaloa, were present. The climate, the elevation, really is uncontrollable. Within half an hour to an hour's time, the wind shifts, the mists come in, then suddenly the great clouds disappear, the sun comes out. And for me, I am very sensitive to the sun's rays because it burns my skin. But that is the presence of kane, ka'unohe o kala. Yeah. It validated for me within one period of time to not more than an hour, maybe hour and a half, there's a shift. The natural elements manifest themselves very dramatically. Over here, it's a little more subtle. We have had experience here when during our oli, ho mai ka ike mai luna mai e, we have a ho'ailona experience. Ho'ailona is a sign. It is a symbol, like the wind that comes when it's really hot and humid and still. Like the rain that just the heavens open and the raindrops fall so huge with thunder and lightning. As our class experienced about 2 years ago when we went to Kukaniloko, we were drenched in the rain. When we chanted Eho Mai, they responded. And when we asked permission, introducing ourselves, it stopped. Yeah. So those manifestations, I believe, are mana, spiritual mana. Yeah. So, how do you help yourself to feel and to recognize that level of spirituality? Well, we've been taught from an early age to nana, to ho'olohe, to pa'akawa'a, and to hanakalima. These guidelines all relate to our senses. Each one of us has these senses. To be alert, to be mindful of what's going on, to see what you see here, but to see what is missing but should be here. To hear what is being said, but to hear with the third ear what is not said, but is meant. Yeah? Like the thunder. And to hear the clapping. Yeah. to hear the voice, to be able to recognize that that is Ho'ailona. Ho'ailona that has a message for us. And when we do protocol, we ask permission. We just don't ask permission, then go right in. We wait. How are the spiritual elements going to respond to us? We have to look for the Ho'ailona. It might be where everything is still, then the slight breeze just comes through that responds. You're down at the beach and you want to go out fishing, but you're not sure. The rainbow comes right over the ocean that tells you it's okay. Yeah. At a funeral, when you're preparing the food for the aha'aina make, the feast after the funeral, the deceased creates the heavens to get gray and the clouds to be dark, and the rain comes and the thunder comes, and a member in the family says, "Kahekili, please stop it." Who's she talking to? Her deceased sister's name was Kahekili. Kahekili means thunder. So the natural elements manifested itself, and Kahekili was always with the family when we gathered to prepare the aha'aina make. And she said, "You keep this up, you're going to flood us out. We cannot finish for your aha'aina make tomorrow. So please stop it." Weird, yeah? Weird way people, Hawaiians behave. But you know, within 2 minutes, the rain stopped. No more thunder, no more lightning. By 3 to 5 minutes, the clouds begin to separate. And the beautiful Mahealani moon shine down. The rest of the family get chicken skin because they know she heard. She assisted in making it happen. Yeah. So what were the Ho'ailona? The heavens opened. They burst open. The thunder, the lightning, and the heavy rain, the drenching kind of rain.
What was that, the whole idea of that it's okay what you're doing? I don't like what you're doing? How do you tell?
How do you interpret it?
Yeah, to be good or not good. The clouds came and thunder came and all that. I would think they don't want us to be making this food.
I guess the family knew that the person for whom we were doing the aha'aina make, her name was Kahekili. She's now with the natural elements. And we knew that she always joined us. And so we connected, at least her sister connected it with her. She needed to let everybody know she was present with them as they gathered as the ohana, the extended family, because she was always one of the leaders in doing that. Anytime somebody died, we all go to the family's house and we prepare. but the thunder was the cue. And so she made the correct interpretation. And when she verbalized it, the rest of the ohana, the aunties and the uncles and the cousins, they said, I think it's her. They couldn't make the connection, but her sister did. So, you have to be able to understand what is happening at that place, in that time, for the natural elements to manifest themselves. And you have to be able to figure out what is the connection of these elements with the event that is happening. So the place, the event, and its relationship with the natural elements through the use of names that are relative and related to the gods' names. So, ho'ailona. One level is to recognize that it's happening. The next level is to figure out what is the connection with what I'm doing here in this place. So we felt the ua, we heard the thunder, and we felt the tent shake. And all of those elements, yeah. Ho'ailona could be a sign like a bird that comes out of nowhere. If you're on the ocean and you're out of sight of land, you see the kauae bird flying. That's the aumakua of navigators and voyagers. How comforting it is to see that ho'ailona. Because the kauae comes from land. So the aumakua is coming out to reach them, to guide them to land. Yeah. So for many situations, interpretation has to do with the symbol that is shown, your purpose and the place, the event. Jackie?
When I was working with Department of Health, we worked a lot with several kupuna around the island, and they talked a lot about ho'ailona, and I often wondered what you were saying. How do you know? I mean, like, what is, how do you interpret, how do you make the connection? And one day I went to pick one up. She had just flown in from Hilo, Aunty Ulu Garmin Kanakaole. And she got in the car and she said to me, "Oh, Jackie, I had ho'ailona." I was taking off on the plane from Hilo and she saw the bird. And I thought, "Oh, what does that mean? I'm supposed to know or what?" You know, because that's all she said. And then about 20 minutes later, she said, "Well, that means I was going to have a good trip, a safe trip to Honolulu and back." And that's how, you know, she interpreted. But yeah, I guess you just know there's a connection that you make from your background. Or and another one that talked about an owl at one time that had significance to her family.
That's right.
Yeah, and I guess that I finally understood it's something you have to have that connection. You have to make that connection.
Yeah. And ho'ailona is something that is out of the ordinary. It's a sign that stands out, that doesn't seem to fit what's going on. It's out of the ordinary.
I have something to share. So, a couple of years ago, my wife used to help set up for weddings or big parties with our friend. And one day she was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Nothing." She goes, "Come with me." I went, "Where are we going?" And she said, "Oh, Ko'olina." I went, "For what?" And she went, "A wedding." I went, "Oh, okay." So as we were driving, it was sunny. And then as we get not sure the place right next to where Paradise Cove, where they have the weddings. As soon as we hit Ko'olina, it just downpoured. I'm like, "Oh, really? Okay." So we get there. The tents that they had set up the night before, the poles busted because of all the rain from the night before, and now even more. So while we waited for the new tent and the new poles to arrive, I was just sitting in the car going, "Really?" I went, "Oh, what kind of couple is getting married today?" She went, "Oh, I think one Hawaiian boy and one Kepani." I went, "Oh, is he from this side?" And she goes, "I think so. Why not?" I went, "Oh, okay." And so I asked for the rain to at least slow down so we can help the tents get to where it had to be. And then the boy arrived, and nice Hawaiian boy. So I went up to him and I went, "You from this side?" He's like, "Yeah." "Oh, okay. How deeply rooted are you with your ancestors?" And he's like, "Why?" I went, "How long has it been raining?" He went, "Since we arrived yesterday." "Oh. Just saying, maybe you should, aside from asking her parents for permission to marry her, why don't you ask your ancestors if it's okay for you to marry her?" And he went, "Huh?" I went, "Just to see, just thought I'd leave it at that." And so he went off, and 10 minutes later he came back and he went, "So I said a small pule." I went, "Oh, right on." He went, "But it's still pouring." I went, "Yeah, give it time." And then 5 minutes later, the rain completely stopped. The clouds opened up and the sun came down. And so we finished setting up and we left. And our friend called after the party. And she said, "I don't know what she did, but he made this big long speech about how it rains and everything that was like turmoil and happened that night and the day." She went, "It didn't downpour again until we finished breaking down everything." I went, "Oh, right on." And so my wife said, "Oh, I guess there's a reason why you went." I went, "I guess so."
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. And
So sometimes the ho'ailona is the manifestation of the natural elements. Okay. Sometimes it's the sense of smell that you pick up, a fragrance that doesn't belong here. You're driving, and then you got the air conditioner on, but you smell a fragrance, and it reminds you of somebody. Yeah. It's a communication from a spiritual entity. In the case of my husband, he was driving up Likelike, and he smelled the pakalana, the favorite flower of his mother. And this was in March. Not when the pakalana is in bloom, like in September, October. So, where is this coming from? And he said, "Why at this time that I'm driving?" Then he realized it was late at night. And the fragrance that he smelled said to him, "Boy, you better stay awake. No fall asleep." From that point on, he was so alert. Yeah. So, the ho'ailona or the spiritual presence finds its way to come to you, even if you're not asking for it. And when they come, their communication is out of love and concern for your protection and well-being. So give heed. Why did Mama come? And then he realized. She always said to him, you stay out late doing community work. You leave the house at 8 o'clock, you don't come back until 9:30, 10, 11 o'clock at night. He's exhausted. Yeah. He used to travel from Nanakuli all the way to Kahalu'u because he did community work in this area. So that sense of smell is what he recognized, the message being stay awake. And because it was spiritual presence and he knew he connected it to his mama who was deceased, he was alert all the way home. Yeah. Sometimes the ho'ailona comes because the uhani recognizes there is imbalance that people are ignoring. Such as the case where a girl had been given in birth to a family member not part of the ohana. She made the choice to go outside of the ohana. So before being going for baptismal, they were getting ready to have the luau. But there were many obstacles coming about. And Mama said, what the heck is going on? Some of the ho'ailona included seeing the old lady and the white dog as they drove on the highway going by Sandy Beach up to Kalama to get the pig. Another ho'ailona was when her daughter was returning to Honolulu around Morgan's Corner in the old Pali Road, that real U-turn. They saw this black pig run across and they swerved to avoid it, but was going into the Pali and stopped before they crashed. On that same night with the Pali incident, Mama and her son, who was driving the car, left Hau'ula, going towards Kahana, just coming around the bend from Punalu'u, come to Kahana, and just straightening out. The driver of the car was in a trance, attracted to the light from the telephone pole, heading straight for the telephone pole. His sister next to him pulled on the brakes. It was a hand brake. And she jerked on it with all her strength and hung on, and the car stopped before he hit the pole. Spun around 3 times, going back in the opposite direction. That broke the trance, and he swore, what the F is going on? His mama, sitting on the other side by the door in the front, saw all of this happening, but she couldn't speak. Her voice wouldn't come out. And tears were running down her eye because they were headed for that telephone pole. These are events that are weird. But these are events that tell you something is not pono. Something is off balance. So we got to go find out what it is. They couldn't interpret all of these signs. So they went to a ho'oponopono lady who lived in Ka'aava. She had the ability to see things. She had the ability to recognize things in the future. She had the ability, when she saw you coming, she had an idea what the pilikia was. And she interpreted, not identifying the exact things, but with enough of an idea that it had to do with a child. And the huki. The child was the one that was going to be baptized, that was lave hanai, outside of the family. But the biological ohana relative wanted the child herself and was very upset the child did not stay in the ohana. So huki from two sides. And the Ho'oponopono lady said, when are you going to have the event? And they said, tomorrow. She said, you will find out who it is. She couldn't give all the answer, but she could give enough information to prepare the family who was hanaying the baby. And sure enough, setting up everything, they built the kind of picnic tables where the bench is attached to the top like they have down at the beach. Those things are solid. This family came in. All they heard was a crack that sounded like thunder. When they ran outside, the bench had cracked. And the table had bent. And when they looked, the mama said, you folks, come inside the house. She knew that this was the other party that was causing huki on the child. And mama knew she had to set it to right, otherwise the baby is the one who going to suffer. She called the family in. At the point, she said, that table is solid, but you folks came and you cracked the table. What are you upset about? So they talked it out. And the biological ohana said, the baby should have been mine. No go to an outsider. And she said, it was not yours to give, it was the mama's to give. But if you continue doing this, I already know you're the cause of this pilikia. So you better stop it. Otherwise, the baby is the one going to suffer. At that point, the family realized they were indeed hanging on. And that auntie agreed, through mihi, forgiveness, to release the baby, to not hang on anymore. Yeah. And the baby is a grown woman. She's a grandmother today. Yeah. Sometimes ho'ailona gives you warning. Yeah. It prepares you for something that might happen.
Yeah, and I think growing up, I was really scared because, I don't know, it was something that I couldn't touch, right? So it was scary to me. But I think as I've lived it, I've been away for 45 years, right? So after high school, I went away. And someone says, why did you come back, And this is where my soul sings. It just sings over here, and the elements speak different here, So I lived in the Woodlands, Texas, and it's beautiful, right? It's got big trees, and the winds come through, and it doesn't have the same feel. It's only in Hawaii. You stand on this land. Like today, the leaves are, all the leaves are talking. Like the wind is kind of my element. So I can just hear them talking like, oh, this is a good gathering going on over here. Like, you're like, I get that. But here, it's like I grew up Catholic, but it always felt my religion was there. But being in the elements and spirit brings it here. And you just feel it in all your senses, right? It's in your eyes, it's what you smell, it's what you taste, it's just, you just feel it different here, And I just, whenever I'm not feeling really good, every morning I have to get out of the house and I walk 5 o'clock in the morning. And I have to be in the elements because that's where I can speak to spirit then. And spirit responds the same way, in kind, And I feel like when I sit down and I look at the Waianae Mountain Range and then I can feel the wind on my face, it's like, okay, this is a place this spirit lives. And my husband passed away 8 years ago. And I remember telling him, he had a long illness, and I said to him, you better take care of me, when you die. You better not be playing golf up there, like when I need you better not be playing golf up there. And he goes, no, I'm going to take care of you, So and then we put his ashes in Wailua, because I'm from Wailua, and there's a turtle hollow bridge where the river comes out and meets the sea. And we put his ashes there. So on his fifth, I go there every once in a while, just kind of sit down and talk story. But on the 5th anniversary, I went there. And I was sitting down and I said, wow, 5 years, who would have thunk, and we were just kind of jibber-jabbering, and he says, stand up, I got something for you, So there's a bridge, and it's an old bridge. It's not an old fancy, beautiful looking bridge, okay, it's like a rickety bridge. So I walked along that bridge, and this side is the ocean, and there was, I was looking at the ground because I thought, maybe I'll find a penny, And I went across the bridge, and I came back this way, and then halfway, looking at the mountain range, I looked down and I saw something half white, like almost like an egg, and I picked it up. And he is an avid golfer, not a little bit kind of golfer. He is an avid golfer, and it was a golf ball. And I was like, here in the middle of this cane field bridge, looking, there's no golf courses around. I picked it up and I held it. And I go, oh my God, that is so you. Like, this is so you, right? And it just was so confirming, that he was there. Because he told me, I'm going to take care of you, I'm going to take care of you, And then I remember putting that golf ball up, and I remember showing it to my boys. They go, what? Where did you find it? And they both play golf, right? And so I was like, wow, that is like so awesome. And I feel him, every once in a while. And I talk to him, but it's not ever scary. There's just a really neat confirmation. And since then, I've gotten two other ones, all separate. Never thought you'd find a golf ball places, and they each have been signs. The second one was I had a spiritual partner, and he and I got very close as a spiritual partner, and that's something Ernie and I didn't share. It was the spirituality, and it bothered me, that this person could understand my spirituality, and he had a spirituality sense of his own, and his favorite number is 4, my spiritual partner. We're up in the motocross field. There it is a golf ball, and it has a number 4 on it. And it's like, okay, Ernie's saying, it's okay, it's all right. I know where you are, and I know you guys have this spiritual connection, and that's okay, And then just recently, I had to end a relationship that was kind of long going, and it was not like, oh, this relationship, yeah. It's like this way, we did it this way, and it has to end. You're not going to have a relationship this way ever again. You can form a new one, but you can't have this back. It's power, your growth period is power. So then I'm in this parking lot, and I looked out and I see a golf ball, and I'm like, oh my God. And this has been happening over years, so this is not like all of a sudden. So I pick it up, and it has a stag on it, like a buck, like a deer buck. And I'm like, oh, so what is this? A buck? Okay, so I put it up, where I have all the other golf balls, and then I thought about it. And something said, go look it up. Go look at the spiritual nature of a bug. And it was about renewal and starting anew and starting fresh. It's like, no, you're on a new path. So just take it, like go with it, you know, like it's okay. And then, and things will come around. And so I know that, like I said, when my soul sings, I just go outside, and every time I'm like troubled, I just sit in nature. Like I just sit on the ground, and I just can hear, like just, you know, like the answers just come. And it's so soothing. And I've never felt it anywhere. I lived in California for many years. I lived in Texas for many years. And I just never felt it like that. And I just know that this place is really special. So as I came home and I didn't know what I was going to do, I just sat with Spirit and I said, you know what, you know the answers. You know what should come into my life. And it's been just an opening and opening and opening. And sometimes I'm thinking, ew, I don't think I want to go there because I don't think I want to do that. Spirit goes, oh no, you're going to go because this is where you belong. So trusting is huge, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been an awesome journey.
You know, all of the Ho'ailona experiences that we've been sharing either are a validation of you're doing something good and to continue doing it. Sometimes the Ho'ailona comes with a reward. Something opens up for you that you didn't expect. On the other hand, some Ho'ailona comes as a warning for protection. Something is happening in your life that needs attention. You are not pono. You have to bring it back into balance. Yeah. So, oftentimes, it is the uhane of a deceased relative, whether recent or of the distant past. Yeah. In Halava Valley in 1962, my husband and I had our honeymoon there. And he worked at the Bishop Museum doing surveys. So he's very familiar with archaeological sites. On one side of the valley, he came across a stone, and it looked like a fishtail to me. So I said, this is an akua stone? He said, never mind, just put it in the bag and carry it. And I said, but I don't want to touch it. And he said, never mind, do it. A wife of only 2 days. And I'm standing my ground. No, I don't want. And then I back off and I listen. I walk from here to the roadway and I'm very conscious the bag is getting heavy. So I call out to him and I said to him, I don't care what you say. I'm not carrying it anymore. I'm putting it on the stone wall. If you want it, you come and get it.
Yeah.
Right after that, he's up on the hillside. He finds an aunt's workshop where people come to bring the stones and to fashion poi pounders or stone implements. And he says, I found an ad site. Immediately, my people are mahi'ai with kalo. So I said, oh, I wish I could find a poi pounder. So I tell him, let me know, I'm going to follow your voice. I follow and I go up there. And my mind is saying, I wish I can find a poi pounder. I go, I dig with my feet. I turn over the stone until I see one stone that's kind of smooth on one side. So I dig around to see what it's going to reveal. And then it dawns on me, it looks like the beginning shape of an aspect of a poi pounder. So I call my husband in my excitement and I tell him, come help me dig this up. He digs it up. It is a poi pounder. The only thing is the knob at the top is missing. The craftsperson must have just hit it and the top came off. So I said to myself, they heard my wish. Here's my poi pounder. He went further. He picked up a stone and he said to me, I'm going to toss it in my frustration if I was the maker of this. He tosses it and he says, go to where it was. I go, he leaves the poi pounder down, and then he comes, he picks up that rock. I go back to where the poi pounder is. He walks the circumference around. We found the knob.
Oh my gosh.
For me, this whole Ailona had to do with the fishtail. I refused to carry it. It did not belong to me to leave. And so my mental telepathy wish allowed me to find the poi pounder. All of these events, I told my husband, I said, when I put the bag on the wall, immediately I wished I could find one poi pounder. It must have worked on his mind, because after we found the knob and we were real happy, he came down. He went back to get the bag with the stone. He walked only from here to no more than the Uhwo. And he said to me, you're right. I am not to take this out of this area. So he took it out. He looked and he found an abandoned well. He placed it in and he put other stones on top of it to protect it from the animals in the valley from walking over it. When he met me on the trail again, we were walking, and on the side, the grass stand up because it's a long time since people go to cut. Then suddenly we see one section, the grass lying down, and ulumaika placed there. He looks at me and I look at him. Did you hear anybody around here? Nobody was around. Then I said, how did it get placed? Because the weeds are down. So he looked at me and I said, I think this is a reward because you win malama the pohaku. This is okay for you to take. This stone is okay. Like the poi pounder was okay because I refused to take, yeah? So, our ancestors that are in our DNA accompany us. And halava is onihanau for my ohana. The fact that he wanted to do some things that was not pono, but got stopped, and then he did the pono thing to make it right. We felt that my ancestors were recognizing the good deed. And so the ohana, the deceased relatives, find ways to communicate, to reward, and to punish. If you do something bad, if you take the name of a person you never get permission from, illness can be manifested on your body. In Hawaiian tradition, your name is a valuable possession. There's only a few things that you can say you own. People cannot use it or take your name because there's a kapu. You never give permission. Tutu says many people that she doesn't even know give her Hawaiian name to their children. So she had to go Pule, where her ohana lived, and the one who gave her the name, to remove the kapu from her name so that the innocent child is not punished for taking on that kapu name. Yeah. So the uhani can punish as well. And at that point, then you got to remove the kapu, or you have to change the name. My auntie was given a name, Mary Keahi. But our family come from the windward side, which is Kamapua'a. Keahi is a Pele name. She got sick. And they called someone to come in, and they said, the name no good for her, because Pele and Kamapua'a are opposites. Got to change her name, so we pule to Oki the name. And she was given the name of Kealoha. From that time on, she was okay. Yeah. So, spiritual presence, spirituality comes from within your genealogical line. And you may not realize it. Yeah. But you have the capacity to tap into it. Yeah. And these stories are true experiences. Yeah. At one time, I don't believe in Hawaiian stuff, superstition. Weird, I don't understand, so I don't like believe. But you take me to the crypt, the graveyard, you take me to a Hawaiian place, I get healthy respect for that, even if I don't believe. I was forced with the test after my grandfather died. We were visiting with the family. And I heard he had died 2 months before. I heard the dog Uhwo. It's the dog howling in a sad way. And this must have been about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I know that this was the dog of my tutu. And so I just said out loud, Tutu, if this is you, I'm so howling, I have to see a sign. Give me a sign. And I'm looking at the wall ahead. I see this round circle of light going right across the wall. My husband is next to me. I hit him with my elbow and he gets startled. I said, don't say anything. You see that light? You see the light going across? He said, yes, I see the light. What's so big about it? I said, that's Tutu. I asked him for a sign. So what does that tell us? The channel of communication is there. We're linked with our DNA. Tutu says, Tutu Pukui says, you can talk with the spirits. I talked to him. He gave me that sign. From that time on, I flipped. And I studied under Mary Kavenopukui. I studied about how do we relate to spirituality. Yeah. And every time I've had encounters, I have never been forsaken. And yet I realize it could be a manifestation of my belief in the Christian God. Because the creator of all things, of all forces, and yet because it is Hawaiian, it is related to an indigenous culture. I cannot ignore the fact of the aumakua and the deceased kupuna in my genealogy. Yeah. So spirituality, you can talk with them. You can explain. They give you responses. Sometimes you have a dream. That's their way of letting you know that they are there. It's their way of letting you know that they know everything is not all right and you got to do something about it. It's their way of letting you know they have seen the good of what you do and they reward you. They also have a way of letting you know when you do something heavy, because you get punished for it. Yeah. So, Hawaiian spirituality is mana. Mana is spiritual power. Yeah. This opens a doorway for others whose indigenous ethnic backgrounds are different from Hawaiians, because they all experience the phenomena of seeing spirits or dealing with spirits in their lives. Yeah. Spirituality for each individual is embedded in your mo'okuauhau. With the piko that's up here, the piko that's here, and you'll pass on that same tendency through the DNA to the future generations. It has a close connection. When you get the sign, the ho'ailona, it is related to the place that you're at and your immediate actions. Yeah. Some of the experiences that you've been hearing about also indicate that they're Hawaiian type situations that have to do with spirituality. And they're often very frightening because you don't understand and you don't know how to deal with it. But please know, every Hawaiian problem has a Hawaiian solution. In the case with the Lavehanai child and the disturbance before the baptismal party, the solution was to get the translation of the meaning and then to do ho'oponopono. The one you just cited. The name was not meant to be because of transgression. So it was to oki the name, or to remove the kapu from the name, like Mary Kavenapukui. So every Hawaiian situation has a solution. Now, what does that mean? It's not going to find fertile ground.
You planting the seed for Hawaii.
Because it doesn't belong. It doesn't belong in here.
You planting the seeds for.
Yeah. Yeah. So I ask you to think about yourselves and to feel confident in knowing spiritual presence is often connected with weird experiences. Yeah. And they manifest themselves by way of the five senses, through a dream, through a scent, through a sensation on the arm, to visually seeing natural elements that appear out of context. These are all signs of spiritual presence.
I guess from when you're young and you pay attention to these kind of things, and you get older, you become a professional at it. And like just like for me, you know, like being at one young age, and I do a lot of things, you know, by myself. Like when I go, you know, fishing or hunting. And one incident I remember having was I was at Mount Lahi Lahi, and I was fishing for moi, and I had my throw net, and the waves was big. Like I was doubting even, you know, attempting to catch the fish. And then when I look inside the moi hole, I saw, oh, I seen some big mois, and I wanted them. So I was, you know, watching the waves, and I count the waves, and you know, after 6 the thing settled down, and I count the waves again, or 8 the thing settled down, and so I wind up, the next settle down, I wind up throwing my net. And so as soon as I throw my net, I gotta jump in the water, and I gotta pick up the net and get out, because the next set
coming in.
So I jump in the water, and I don't can find my net. So I'm like, what the, you know? So then I you know, I dive down. I dive a little bit further out for see if the surge wind suck them out. I cannot find my net. Finally, I come back up on top of the rock. The waves come in. So I stay counting the waves. I'm looking out inside the puka. I said, I swear I want to throw my net inside there. And then something told me for look to my left. I looked to my left like that. My net was on top of the rock next to me. I was like, what the? So I grabbed my net. Kalamai, Aole today. You know, I start talking to the, you know, spirit of that area. And that was my lesson for that. And I wrap up my net, put them away, and today is now a good day.
Yeah. And they were teasing you.
You know, oh, man.
You know, on TV now, the news, one of the news channels talks about the right day to go fishing and the right day to go farming land. I don't know if you've seen that, newscaster.
Yeah, Kamakapili.
I don't watch TV, so
Anyway, just kind of goes along with.
You know, Auntie, I wanted to say, you know, because we do work out at Kukani Local, and Uncle Peter is the one who had kind of taught me. I mean, like, you know, you see the natural, the obvious ones, but then he's the one who talked about, like, it's just being still and like closing your eyes and really listening and hearing the things that, like, you don't always hear the bird chirping, but if you listen hard enough, you hear it, you know. Like, so every time we prepare for groups to come out to Kukani Local, we always like settle and listen, and you know, we always come early, and then it kind of helps us to know what kind of group we're gonna be getting, you know, because we normally can tell, like, we get there and like get plenty black clouds, you know, and we're like, oh, somebody gonna need cleansing before they come in, you know, and stuff like that. Or you know, just hearing those things that in your Western mind you don't hear it, you know what I mean, but in your Hawaiian mind you learn to hear. Or even like, just, it's like how you said, it's very still, and then all of a sudden a gentle breeze come, and you know that that's your kupuna greeting you, or, you know, telling you, I'm here, you know, with you. And it's just realizing that that's what it is, you know, and not just, you know, like.
Yeah. It's being very mindful and super alert to your surroundings. Yeah. For sounds, for sights, and all of that. Yep.
We got to finish this architect, because everyone's going to go.
Okay. It's attentive mindfulness. When I say attentive, work to heighten your senses. Be alert to the sight that is unseeing but is there. And then you begin to see the signs. It's like using your third eye. We see things for the surface of what is here. But if we look a little bit more deeper, we pick up that these clouds are giving us coolness. Yeah. So it's seeing with the third eye. And seeing with the third eye, what was that big moi down there tempting you? So you go after it, and then it nalovale disappears. Yeah. But you find your net on the...
No, spits up the net. Like
Yes. How
Spit
did
it
that
up.
happen?
Spit it up.
You know?
Yeah.
So it talks about your character to covet something. Yeah. Yeah. So that's some of the lessons. Yeah. So remember ho'ailono. Ulaleo are voices that you hear. That is another thing that happens. You see visions, images that are clear, images that are blurred. Those are all visions. Yeah. So this means that you have come to a level deep within yourself and your psyche to get in touch with that communication pathway with the spirit world. Yeah. And don't be afraid of the symptoms, the signs, because spirituality only comes out of love and concern and protection. They'll reward you, or if you are heva, they punish you. Or they play tricks on you. Not punish you, but they play tricks on you.
Not your day, boy. Not your day, boy.
Yeah. So, time for us to ku'iluna, the end of our class.